Hi, welcome back to class, and we are entering the third week, and so this is Module 3, and so I just wanted to go over what we're doing this week. This week we're actually going to be investigating social stratification with regards to race and ethnicity, and we are working on Chapter 2 of the text, so I'm going to change this while I'm making the video. Again, this week we're doing a screencast. I did have a little bit of an issue with making an actual recording, so I will make my face-to-face recording maybe midweek this week, because some of you have never seen me before, and other people have had me in their face-to-face classes. But most weeks we will be using a screencast for class. And this gives us an opportunity to do a quick rundown of what we'll be going over. This week what we're going to do is, in looking at stratification, I know a number of you have had that class in prior semesters, and we're going to dive into looking at this through a lens of race and ethnicity. And for the purpose of this class, I want to dive into the idea of implicit bias, and this is something that came up in prior videos in the class starting with the first week. And implicit bias is a concept I want you to understand, because most discrimination that happens in this country and around the world is not happening at just an overt, clear level. A lot of it is happening in more subtle ways, and enough of these subtle situations can lead to something that's quite unpleasant for people who are on the receiving end of it. And if you look at a racist event on television, what you're generally seeing is the tip of the iceberg. So you're seeing a very small chunk of what really happens. So, for example, when you've seen the neo-Nazis marching in Charlottesville, that is a real problem. But again, that's a very identifiable tip of the iceberg problem. The bigger day-to-day issues that people face in their communities are actually where most stratification and racism and ethnic discrimination and intersectionality, as a concept we'll get into next week a bit, that's where it occurs, is at this lower level. So it could be, in a classroom, it could be the teacher staring at students while talking about their ethnicity, making them feel alienated, or making them feel like they have to maybe be the spokesman for their whole group. Or it could be the policeman who is pulling somebody over, stopping maybe a pedestrian on the side of the road. Are they stopping them because they're jaywalking, or are they stopping them because they might be the wrong skin color in the neighborhood? These are things that happen on a daily basis, and they're things that often the person who is doing it isn't aware of. And it is something that we can dive deeper into and understand. One thing I wanted to really get across when I set this class up is that the most visible forms of prejudice are not the only forms. So this is the section where we're going to dive into this and see a little bit more. So to give you the information, you're going to watch about 6 videos on implicit bias. And I just want you to write a short summary on them. After you do that, you're going to take an implicit bias test, and I will show you how to go ahead and do that. And we'll have a couple of drop boxes this week, a quiz, and a discussion that gets into a really fun topic of Afrofuturism. So it's addressing biases and issues in our system while looking to the future. So what we're going to watch is a series of TED Talks and videos from UCLA. And then so this is a TED Talk we're going to watch here. We're going to start off with this. And then we have lesson 5 and 6 from UCLA, and they're looking at the implicit bias test and countermeasures. Then there's a Scientific American Frontier video, which is really interesting because it shows the people who developed the test that you will be taking to identify your own biases. And then there's a couple of videos on what these biases do. And again, I really want you to have an understanding of this, but between these 6 videos, you'll get a lot of information. And I just want you to write a short Dropbox on each one of these, a short paragraph on each one of them. So your Dropbox assignment will be, maybe a page and a half, just discussing some main points from each of these videos. Again, 1 to 2 paragraphs, and they don't have to be long, so don't think you need to write a very long paper again. Then we have a Dropbox 3.2, which you're going to first do the implicit bias test, and I want you to write a reaction to your results. You don't have to tell me what your results were. This is really for your own information, but I want you to give me your reaction to the results of the test, and whether or not you were surprised by the results. And then I want you to answer a question, and the question is, why do so many social scientists argue that implicit biases are the main culprit for inequality in our society? I want you to think about that and see if you agree with that argument, and explain why or why not. So I want you to really think about this here, because when people say they're talking about racism, I want you to have a deeper understanding. It's than just the marcher with the tiki torch in Charlottesville, or somebody yelling at somebody else on the street. Again, that's like I say, a tip of the iceberg. And to do the implicit bias test, I have a link here. So all you're going to do is you're going to hit the link. Just go ahead and say you wish to proceed, and then pick any of these tests you want. This is a race or ethnicity class. So I do hope you do pick something about a racial group or a skin tone for your first test. You could take more than one if you want, and I do actually encourage you to take them. When you take the test, you could take it more than once, but I want you to go ahead and take one of these tests and pay attention to your answer. Again, you don't have to give me how you did in the test. I'm not really interested in that. In reality, we all have a bias one way or the other. So this test is looking at just what you're used to seeing. And there's a deeper reason to this, and we will get deeper into this as the class goes on. And then there's a little more fun videos we're going to have our discussion on, and this is videos with Robin Thede. They're from last year when Black Panther came out. But what she's doing, she's a comedian on BET, and she's investigating a concept of Afrofuturism. But she's also discussing some issues with our current society, and she talks about how biases and stratification is keeping people out of certain industries, and also having an effect on things like our IT world. So, for example, there's hand dryers and automatic sinks that don't recognize certain skin colors. Darker skin tones don't get picked up by the technology, and so they get into discussing that a bit. But it's also, because it's done by a comedian, there's a little bit of fun in here, And there's a positive note at the end. So she gets into Afrofuturism, which is looking at the future with a more progressive lens when it comes to viewing race. And when you're looking at videos in this class, when they're discussing one group of people, so if we're looking at a thing like Afrofuturism, remember these concepts can play across to all ethnic groups. So the concepts in Afrofuturism pertain to Native Americans, they pertain to Latinos, they pertain to white ethnic groups. They pertain to everybody. So the concepts you pick up in one group, you can easily transmit to other groups of people and have a bigger discussion. But I think this will be a fun section to look at. Last year, again, I offered this class when this movie came out. So as we went through this section, Black Panther was just making its way into theaters, and we had some fun discussions about that as well. So there's going to be 2 questions on the Module 3 discussion. And again, one is looking at Afrofuturism. I want you to discuss the issues that Robin Thede discusses in these segments, and discuss solutions that she talks about, and how they use Afrofuturism to look at addressing problems. And then, again, I want you to have a question answered on implicit bias. So I want you to discuss why it's important for people to have understanding of their own personal implicit biases. In my classes, I do hope that they're actually a place where there's some self-growth. So race and ethnic relations isn't a thing that you're just a bystander in. I do want you to take these concepts and apply them to yourselves. You know, in the long run, I think there's a lot of opportunity for growth. Personally and professionally, a lot of you are going into social services or working with human services and trying to work with people. So having a good understanding of how people operate across cultural lines is a good idea. If anyone has any questions, be sure to get back to me. I know there's a lot of videos, but most of these are very short. So we're looking at, less than 10-minute videos you'll be watching. But again, if you're going to send me an email, do it on D2L. This is the best way to get a hold of me. And have a great week. Thank you.